What up everyone, it's your boy X-Man87 here, bringing you another Marvel Legends video, and what I have for you today is the Marvel Legends Spider-Man 90s animated series Retro Wave Super Poseable Spider-Man action figure review. Before I get into everything, if you could please leave a thumbs up like rating on the video, it'll help show your support for my channel and I greatly appreciate it. Now with that said, I'm super stoked to talk about this figure, lots to say, lots to cover, so without further ado, let's get it. First and foremost, let's start from the beginning on what this figure pays homage to, and that's the 90s vintage Spider-Man of the Super Poseable Spider-Man from the animated series. The articulation was no doubt ahead of its time, which had definitely paved the way for the next era of toys a few years later as Toy Biz entered the dawn of their pre-Marvel Legends line. Then we started getting a little more classic Spider-Mans that followed suit, the McFarlane Spidey being hailed as the greatest for that time. None of them included alternate hands as they had more of the finger articulation or swappable heads, and the proportions were a bit wonky. Hasbro takes over and some of their early Spider-Mans missed the mark by a lot. It wasn't until they got out of the dark days and introduced a new version of classic Spidey, dubbed as the Pizza Spidey, back in 2015, which at the time was very popular amongst the collector community with all the accessories like swappable hands, heads, and pizza. The body did get a bit outdated as other attempts to make new molds for Spidey were introduced, like the 2099 white suit to name one for example. Now in this year of 2020, we get introduced to this new and improved classic Spider-Man version 2. I have my pros and cons about it, but for the most part the good outweighs the bad. So let's get into what this figure is all about. First, I gotta say, I am extremely happy that they made a buff-looking Spider-Man for a classic version. It's something that I've been wanting for a long time, especially since I grew up a big fan of the 90s Spider-Man animated series, which was my favorite Spider-Man TV show. And in that depiction of the animated series, he has that same physique of what we see here pretty much, and it goes beyond the animated series. Going into the comics, one of my favorite depictions of Spider-Man was John Romita Sr.'s. He had this buff-looking Spider-Man. And this body mold is definitely a refresher for Spider-Man figures because I was getting tired of the Pizza Spider-Man mold. The last figure I reviewed in that mold was the Big Time Spider-Man, and I trashed it because I needed them to evolve Spider-Man figures. And just bringing out a Pizza Spidey mold right next to him, as you can see, the proportions are so much better on this one. Look at these two posed next to each other in a vanilla pose. You can see that his arms can be posed straight down, whereas this one's more far apart. Just doesn't look natural, and I'm all about what looks natural. And looking at a side profile right here, you could just see how this one naturally stands straight. I used to hate how the hips were on these legs, man. It just feels like he's leaning forward, like he's about to do the Michael Jackson Smooth Criminal kind of dance move. Another thing to note on this side profile, look at the Pizza Spider-Man's hip joints right there. It's like bulging out, and this one is nice and flush. And another thing to point out is this one has a peg hole on the back of the Spider logo where this one doesn't, so I'm very happy about that. And as far as paint app goes, this one is still so much better. I love the blue. They got the blue right on this one, or at least my preferred blue for a Spider-Man blue. Not a pun, by the way, but Spider-Man Blue was a great book, probably my favorite Spider-Man book, so that's a highly recommended read right there. Maybe I like the red on this one a little bit more, but I don't know, it's not too far off and not enough for me to be like, oh my god, it had to be this red, you know? Then you got the black trimming on the top of the boot right here. This didn't have a calf swivel. This one does not have black on top of the boot as it has a calf swivel, so there wasn't really a need to do that. I think this still looks good. Now as we take a look at all the classic Spider-Man versions under Hasbro, at least the past 5 years, since 2015, you can see that we've had different shades of paint in the blue and the reds. So the Pizza Spider-Man started it all between these guys right here, and the blue and red looks really good here. Then a year later, we get the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive Raft set, which offered this McFarlane Spider-Man in a darker, much darker blue deco. And at the same time of this release, the Space Venom Build-A-Figure wave came out, and we got this Ultimate Spider-Man version, and again, a dark blue color. Then in 2017, we get the Vintage Wave Spider-Man, and this has the lightest shade of blue. But for me, this new Retro Spider-Man has the best blue and red combo color out of all of these. Now looking at the different Hasbro body types for our classic version of Spider-Man, you can tell that each body type tells a story. This ultimate version of Spider-Man was in high school, so this is good for your teenager Spider-Man. This Pizza Spidey could serve as a good physique for his college days, but this Spider-Man right here, it looks like he's been through some shit. Like, this is definitely a seasoned Spider-Man that's beyond the 10 years of his Spider-Man career and has fought all the baddies. But now let's take an up-close look at this new Spider-Man. Taking a look at the head sculpt, I do like it. I really like how the eyes came out. They look perfect to me. The cobwebs, however, do kill it for me, man. Some issues here where it just doesn't line up correctly. Like, look at that. You see that? Looks like there's a knot right there, and I don't like that. And right here, too, there's a gap. It doesn't fully connect all the way. And it gets bad here. Look at this, man. This is not even aligned properly. And I do have an extra one because I'm going to beat it up posing-wise. And even that, the paint is not good. As you can see, it's very smeared, and on the back it looks like the same pattern. It's just not aligned. Now, one of the biggest cons for this is this new neck joint, and I do not like it at all. It does not look attractive because when you look at the back of this figure, you see this big hole on his neck, and it doesn't look good. And what makes it even worse is when you have this figure look up, look at that gap, man. What the hell? It looks like his head is being cut off. So this is not a good look. Yeah, this is bad. You know, certain angles just pose challenges for this. Like, I just can't have them head on like this. It looks bad. I have to play with my angles so that, you know, it could look better. It does have its perks though, you know. I mean, you can move it back like this and then angle it out like so. Looking at it head on, you know, it pivots nicely, so no interference on that. I guess this is better than nothing because you got that Venom movie figure that does not look up at all, so, you know, it's something, just gotta work with it. Looking at the rest of the body, this looks tough. Wow, you could tell that they took inspiration from the 12-inch Marvel Legends line because that Spider-Man had an upper torso swivel and the inverted ab crunch. So I am happy that they implemented it on this figure. But the fact that we could have this articulation on a regular looking body is a great step in the right direction. And as you can see, the arms have the pins. So this is what really bugs me, man, because back at Toy Fair, they revealed Hawkeye as the first figure announced to have the pinless tech joints, right? Then we got a few figures like the movie X-Men that featured the pinless tech that were released before that Old Man Hawkeye. But anyway, getting to the point I want to make is, why wasn't Spider-Man the first figure to be treated with the pinless tech? Like, he's Spider-Man. He's the face of the Marvel franchise. Like, he has to be priority number one, not Old Man Hawkeye. I get Old Man Hawkeye is pretty cool, but come on, you can't compare Hawkeye to Spider-Man at all. We definitely need this corrected, and I know Dwight Stahl mentioned that he wants to have a Spider-Man with the pinless joints to have the correct blues on the inside and the correct red on the outside to continue that webbing pattern. And I feel like Spider-Man is the character that deserves that pinless tech treatment first on a figure. However, that's going to be in the plans, and you know, just got to take this figure for what it is right now. And this is pretty much testing the waters. This is their phase 2 of Spider-Man, and I'm pretty sure phase 3 of Spider-Man will have the pinless tech joints. And I think the next phase of Spider-Man will not have this ugly gap behind the neck. What I hope they do next, or what I would like to see for a phase 3 Spider-Man or version 3 Spider-Man, whatever, you guys know what I'm talking about. I would love to see a ball joint at the bottom of the neck, just like the G.I. Joe line. That is so beneficial. You could get so much range out of a Spider-Man action figure, which is totally doable, you know, and that could really rival the Mafex here. Again, you see the bottom. Anyway, the paint on the body looks good. I don't have any cobwebbing pattern issues there, so I'm happy about that. The little spider logo that always looked like a tick to me on the back, that looks good, looks clean on mine. Spider logo looks good on the front, that came out clean, and the belt right there looks good. You can see it's painted, kind of cut off there for the inverted ab crunch. But yeah, oh man, this blue looks really, really nice. I do like it. And solid blue, the rest. Again, oh man, I can't wait for a pinless Spider-Man. It's gonna look so smooth. I really hate the serial number being visible right there. Come on, Hasbro, don't do us like that. It should be on the bottom of the foot. And the feet look great. Got the cobwebbing patterns here that look clean on the boots, so I'm happy about that. And then you got the peg holes at the bottom. Now for accessories, he comes with this alternate head that has his eyes a little more squinty. It just reminds me of that funny Spider-Man meme. I wonder why my pillow has a boner. But yeah, it looks pretty cool. The cobwebs are, again, a little messy on the back. You see that? But I do like that we get an alternate expression. And actually, this would be good for the Spider-Man PS4 Advanced suit. Oh, wow. Wow. That looks really, really good. The face shape looks more video game accurate than the default head that came with the Advanced suit. And yeah, putting the retro default head on this Advanced suit looks so good. I really like this. Next up, he has the two closed-fisted hands. And lastly, his iconic web-thwipping hands. When talking about pros and cons, one of the biggest cons for this figure is that he does not come with wall-crawling hands, which for Spider-Man is one of his biggest traits as far as abilities and powers go. So I had to get the wall-crawling hands from the Spider-Man 2-pack that came with Mary Jane in order to put this on, which it fits fine. But not everyone has that figure, so if you want the wall-crawling hands for your retro Spider-Man, but you don't have that figure, that sucks. Because now you're asked out for more replay value. As you see, you won't be able to do poses such as this, which is the 3-point Spider-Man stance, or the perch stance, you know, if you want to get him perched on a rooftop on your display or whatever, you know, you're gonna miss out on that too. And this figure could have benefited from some toe articulation, but still, you could work around it. It still looks good. And then, of course, his iconic wall-crawling pose. So, again, it sucks that you're going to lose out on playability because you don't have these wall-crawling hands. And yeah, I know I only showed 3 poses, for example. You could get so much more, but even that is a lot. Lots of head-swapping fun with this figure. So here's the Pizza Spider-Man head on it. But actually, the House of M Spider-Man should be the same paint. Yeah, this looks so much better as the red matches, so I like that. And here's the head from the MJ 2-pack with the green lens. I don't know if you want to give him like night vision goggles, you can go with this. But the red actually matches perfectly. And here's the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive Raft McFarlane head on it. This is the Peter Parker head from the MJ 2-pack, and this looks really good. Definitely a nice fit for this build. Here's a Battle Damage Peter Parker head from the Craven 2-pack, and this also looks good. And just for fun, here's the Jamie Madrox head on it. Some people use this as a Peter Parker head, but neck looks a little too long for this. And just a big gap right there. Doesn't look right. And another one for fun, here's the Ben Reilly head on it. Here's another Spider-Man head with the mask half on, and I think this looks good as well. One thing I wish that they packed in was a 90s animated series style head. I think it would have fit in perfectly with this being the whole animated series theme. Now to cover the most fun part about this figure is the articulation. So his head moves up that far, and man, the cap is such an eyesore. It moves that far down, left, right. He does have this nice pivot to it, and it rocks around. His arms move this far up, which is not that bad. Down, all around. You got the butterfly joints, or as my boy Sonny calls them, the moth joints. Definitely check out Sonny's channel for some Marvel Legends reviews. That dude is hilarious. You got the shoulder swivel, bicep swivel. You got double jointed elbows. That's all you get, man. He can't touch his shoulders, which, you know, some of their figures are able to do that. And for Spider-Man, I just want the most range. Wrist swivel and the wrist hinge. The double diaphragm joint, which I'm in love with. The upper torso bends in that far and bends that far back. It does swivel, pivots nicely. That's a deep pivot like that, and it rocks around. Then you got the inverted ab crunch right here, so you could push that all the way down. That is so good. Look at the difference on this, man. This double diaphragm joint plays a major impact when it comes to dynamic posing. Then it goes this far back. Again, look at this. It's no contest. And I know I mentioned earlier that I don't like this neck gap, but I did say it has its purposes, so it does kind of complement the double diaphragm joint when you're trying to recreate his iconic corkscrew moonsault pose. So if you're trying to get him to pose like that, wow, yeah, look at that. I did get a shot of this in one of my pictures, so in certain areas like this, for certain posing, it does look good. Look at this. Another iconic pose you could capture with this double diaphragm joint is the leaping double thwip. So this looks so beautiful. Now, one of my most wanted features I wanted to see in a new Marvel Legends Spider-Man is drop down thighs, and we get it with this. So at the hip, you just drop that down, and boom, look at that. This will give you more leg range, more higher kicks, back kicks, leaps, splits, whatever you want to do. The split is not fully there where I want it to be, but so much better than the Pizza Spider-Man mold. Look at that. So as you can see, such a big difference when it comes to leg range for splits. And back at New York Toy Fair of this year, when I interviewed the Hasbro Marvel Legends team, I asked Dwight Stahl if this new Spider-Man was gonna have drop down thighs like the Beast did, and he said there would be a pivot to it. And I'm like, huh, pivot? I didn't know what he meant at the time, but now that I have it in hand, actually it makes sense, where this drop down thigh can drop down individually. So in a way, yeah, I kind of get the pivot here, whereas the Beast, both of them drop at the same time. So this one, you don't have to worry about both of them dropping at the same time. If you want to have one, you know, out a little longer, you can. So that is pretty cool. He kicks up that high, you know, he could touch his toes, so that is some real good articulation there. And his legs move that far back, so you could get a full frontward split. It looks a little awkward, but you know, you can get that. And then his legs rock around. You got the thigh swivel, double jointed knees, and oh man, we get double heels to the butt. That's freaking perfect. Lastly, he has rotation at the calf. His ankles move up that far. They move down that low. Wow, that's impressive. And then his ankles rock all around. So yeah, the articulation on this guy is straight fire. And I love the mix of the new features and articulation with the Spider-Man 2099 white suit body mold. So yeah, the drop down hips or the drop down thigh mechanics make such a big difference when they're not activated. I mean, you can't get the feet together like this, so they don't stick together, but you drop them down and look how close together they stay. So I would love for this to be the new standard. I think it should be the new standard for Marvel Legends going forward instead of the Bucky Cap mold. Could you imagine that, getting this for characters like Daredevil? Oh my god, I want to see that so bad. And Deadpool. Those are probably the two characters I want to see this body mold on the most. But then, you know, you got Moon Knight and you got Ant-Man, Human Torch, Silver Surfer, Gambit. Oh my god, that would be amazing. And even Cyclops would probably get away with this too. So again, I really hope this body mold becomes the new standard, because it's just too good of a mold, almost perfect to not use. But for now, again, if this is going to become the new standard instead of the Bucky Cap mold, the future just keeps looking brighter and brighter for Marvel Legends. Now, to compare our retro Spider-Man next to some other high-end Spider-Man figures, we have the Mezco Toys 112 Collective Spider-Man and the Mafex Spider-Man. All in their classic looks. I still got to get the Revoltech one. I don't have that to break out for comparison. But the proportions on that one is just way too out of... it's blown out of proportion, man. For real. So while the articulation is superb on that figure, it just does not look good for me. And you know I'm all about proportions, so I don't care how much you convince me, it just does not look good. But with this guy for $20, you get that import-like articulation, man, and you just can't beat that. Like, the Mezco Toy Spider-Man is good in articulation, however, this Spider-Man is still better in articulation, so this is when a $20 figure is greater than an $80 figure. Mezco made their Spider-Man a little too tall for my liking, plus this was at the time that their ankles needed work, you know, they had very poor ankle articulation. So ankles is super important with Spider-Man, and he has like a basketball-shaped head, like from neck up, he looks like a freaking lollipop. But this Spider-Man is probably the closest thing you're gonna get to the Mafex Spider-Man in terms of articulation. And I remember trashing this figure in my review because I was one of the few that were plagued with QC issues. And that's what made me hate it. It was like just the arm broke, and along with some other issues, I was just so frustrated. And QC issues make a big difference. But then I got my replacement, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. Now, when it comes down to these two, these are my two favorite classic Spider-Man figures. Now, in terms of articulation, the Mafex is superior. I mean, you're just not going to beat import articulation. But there is a way for the next phase or version of Spider-Man to get close to this. And it's honestly not that far off. As I mentioned before, all we would need is a ball joint at the bottom of the neck. Now, with the diaphragm, I'm okay with the inverted ab crunch, but to get close to this, they can do a ball joint, and we've seen it on the G.I. Joe figures, so they could do something like this. Again, we get the drop down thighs, and then, you know, I mentioned pinless, and then when it comes to the feet right here, this area, this is where the Mafex is super weak in proportion, so you look at the feet on this one, it just looks so much better. I think for a $100 figure, it would have been a little more streamlined if they flushed out the ankles to the feet. And then toe joints, so I think we're not that far off at all. So proportion-wise, this one's greater than the Mafex one, and far as paint-wise, this is a traditional Spider-Man color. I don't know what the hell was going on with this metallic blue, but it did not come off good. So without a shadow of a doubt, this is domestically the best classic Spider-Man that you will find on the market. Now for some comparisons, let us take a trip down memory lane to show us the road on how we got to this new phase of our new superposable Spider-Man from some of the comic versions that came out since 2014. So first one up, in 2014, we got Superior Spider-Man here. The proportions on the upper torso was weak sauce and made his arms and legs look super lanky, a figure that's due for a big upgrade. 2015 introduced Hasbro's first take on a classic Spider-Man in the Legends line, dubbed as Pizza Spidey to many, and it definitely had a major upgrade at the torso, which was way better than Superior Spidey. With a bunch of accessories, this quickly became the definitive Marvel Legends classic Spider-Man. This body would be used for majority of their next Spider-Man figures. In 2016, Ultimate Spider-Man introduced a new male teen buck that would be used for other male teens like Kid Nova. This didn't have shoulder rockers, but the rest of the articulation was still pretty solid. 2017 introduced a much more beefier buck in Spider-Man UK, which works well for this character in the comics, but along with this figure was another beefier buck in the same wave, and that was the Spider-Man 2099 white suit, which was also used for this 2018 Gamerverse Spider-Man Advanced suit. At this point, this is where I really wanted a classic version in this beefier body, as it became the best standard body buck. And in this year, 2020, Superior Octopus almost came close with upper torso swivel, but didn't hit the sweet spot needed for a great posable diaphragm joint to execute an acceptable range. Out of all of these, the Ultimate and UK are the only ones to not have shoulder rockers, but none of these have what the new Retro Spidey has, which is the ball jointed neck, double diaphragm, inverted ab crunch joint, and drop down thighs. We've now reached an evolutionary point with Spider-Man in this new era of Marvel Legends. Here is Spider-Man next to some of his love interests, Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy, and Black Cat. Here he is next to some of my favorite Spider-Man villains, Scorpion, Dr. Octopus, Venom, and Lizard. Here he is next to some of the classic Avengers. And lastly, here he is next to some X-Men members. And now to wrap things up, my final rating is a 9.5 out of 10. I love this figure so much, but I wish I could have given this a perfect score, and I just couldn't, for the main reasons that we did not get the Spider-Man we fully deserve, but at least the one we need for now until the next phase. The two head sculpts look good, but we needed more accessories. We deserve a deluxe treatment for Spider-Man. They go all out for a War Machine figure, but can't go all out for Spider-Man. Marvel's greatest hero deserves his greatest treatment. The fact that he didn't come with wall crawling hands drives me up the wall. We need more head expressions. We need more alternate hands than the basic fist and whips, as there are so many hand gestures that Spidey does. Maybe have a hand to hold a camera, or hands that looks like he's reloading his web fluid cartridges. We need gadgets, as Spidey has used gadgets in the past since he's techie smart. Different web effects like web pulling, zipline, full body web cocoons, and maybe some web bombs. Some of the Gamerverse has some neat ones for web trapping enemies, and we sure as hell need spider sense effects over a damn slice of pizza. The red and blues on him are fantastic, along with the webbing paint on the body, but the sloppy cobwebbing paint apps on the two heads stands out, trying to take your eyes away from admiring a super clean look. The design is great, except the neck gap that ruins the aesthetic in that area. And by now, I'm spoiled by the pinless figures, and I wished it was applied here. Articulation is the best on a Hasbro Legends standard body by adding double diaphragm torso, which is perfect, ball jointed neck, and drop down thighs. Although the drop down legs aren't fully maximized, as we still need a Spider-Man to do a full split, still, you can get a great amount of stylized poses. Better than Pizza Spidey in every way possible. Again, we're not far from having a domestic Spider-Man that has everything an import does, like the Mafex example I demonstrated earlier. Hopefully we can get there within the next 3 to 4 years, or much sooner. However, we can still capture plenty of dynamic Spider-Man poses. Spider-Man needs to be posed with grace. If you can't, you're not doing the character justice in action figure form. Let's face it, I think we can all agree that the greatest Marvel legend of all time would be a Spider-Man that has everything, and I mean everything that I just mentioned, or more. Not a HasLab Sentinel, not a HasLab Galactus, or anything else. It would be making the perfect Spider-Man that we'll keep talking about forever. I always wanted a classic Spider-Man that looks like he is in his prime, and now that I have a Spider-Man prime, while I love it, there is still more left to be desired. I still appreciate this figure for what it is. Super posable, and it's so much fun to pose it over and over. The amount of fun for this figure is too damn high. You shouldn't be on the fence about this at all, as the good still outweighs the bad heavily. It's a highly recommended and must-buy figure. No doubt a guaranteed top 10 Marvel Legend of 2020. So now I kick it back to you guys. What do you guys think of this new Spider-Man? What are you hoping to see in the next phase for Spider-Man figures? Hopefully you agreed with most of what I had to say. Comment below, let me know, we'll chat about it. That was my review. Please follow me on Instagram if you haven't already. Link is in the description below. Get your Marvel Legends Spider-Man 90s animated series Retro Wave at Big Bad Toy Store. Link is in the description below. Hit the notification bell so you know when my latest videos are up, share and subscribe if you're new. Enjoy the pics at the end of the video. See you on the next review. Peace.